Welcome back to the Be Yourself Unapologetically podcast. I'm Becca, your host, and tonight we're going to talk about why mental health has to come before exams, why we are setting children up for anxiety and depression when we push them to fit our dated educational ideals, especially in mainstream schools, and why I believe child-led learning is the future, particularly for children with special educational needs. If you're a parent, a carer, a teacher, a young person, or someone who works in education and you feel in your gut that something about the system feels wrong, this episode is for you. Before we dive in, a quick reminder: I'm not a doctor, therapist, or psychiatrist. Nothing in this episode is medical advice. I'm speaking as a human, a parent, and someone who has watched children struggle in systems that we were never designed for. Please always speak to a GP or qualified mental health professional if you're worried about a child or about yourself. So as usual, let's start with a deep breath. In, out, let's go. Let's start with the obvious thing that somehow still isn't obvious in most schools. No exam result is more important than a child's mental health. Not SATs, not GCSEs, not A-levels. Not mocks, not predicted grades, not that crucial assessment that everyone is panicking about this term. We say this sentence out loud quite easily, and then we behave as if it isn't true. We tell children, don't stress, just do your best, but also this grade will affect your entire future. It's only SATs, but you're set. Your secondary school, your opportunities might depend on this. GCSEs don't define you, but your college or sixth form place does depend on them grades. And children are not stupid. They hear the real message behind the sugarcoating. They hear, if I don't perform, I am a problem. If I can't cope with school the way everyone else does, there's something wrong with me. If I'm anxious, exhausted or burnt out, I just need to push harder. We act like mental health is nice to have, like it's an add-on, a well-being week, a mindfulness session after we've piled on the pressure. But mental health is not an extra, it's the foundation. If a child is not sleeping, not eating properly, constantly masking, constantly in fight or flight, you can pour as many facts, revision sessions and past papers on top as you like. It won't settle, it just leaks out through the cracks as panic, meltdowns, shutdowns, school refusal, self-harm, regression or total burnout. We have built a school system that behaves as if the brain is separate from the body and the nervous system, as if we can demand performance regardless of how that child is doing. And then we look surprised when so many children end up anxious, depressed or completely disengaged from education by the time they hit their teens. The outdated ideal we're still worshipping. So let's talk about the ideal child that our current exam-obsessed system is secretly built around. They are able to sit for long periods, comfortable in noisy, crowded classrooms, able to process spoken instructions quickly, able to copy from the board, keep up with the pace and transition between subjects smoothly, able to memorise, regurgitate and apply information in timed conditions, resilient to sensory overload, social stress and change, free from major trauma, health issues or neurodivergent profiles that affect learning. That's the template. And yet in real life, children are autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dyspraxic, dyscalculic, highly anxious, highly sensitive, living with trauma, illness or complex family situations, or simply wired differently, creative, kinetic, dreamy, practical, visual, musical, or hands-on. We are trying to squeeze this incredible diversity into one narrow pipeline, and then we label the kids who don't fit as the problem. We say they are behind, underperforming, not reaching their full potential, disruptive, avoidant, school refusers. But here's the truth, that nobody wants to print on the exam timetable. If a child doesn't fit the system, it usually means the system does not fit the child. Our ideals are outdated because they were designed for a completely different era. An era where you were trained to follow instructions, not question them. An era where obedience was the goal. An era where neurodivergent children were either punished, hidden, or not in the classroom at all. And yet we still measure worth in the same way. How well you can jump through a very particular academic hoop at a very specific age in a very specific environment. That's not intelligence, that's compliance. And when we worship compliance over well-being, we send children a very dangerous message. It doesn't matter how you feel, as long as you perform. Tell a child that often enough, and they will either break or they will learn to abandon themselves very early on. Both pathways lead to mental health difficulties later. So how this especially harms children with special educational needs. Now let's talk about children with special educational needs, the kids who already have to work harder just to exist in environments that aren't designed for them. I'm talking about autistic children, children with ADHD, children with sensory processing differences, children with language and communication needs, children with learning differences like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, children with anxiety disorders, trauma histories, physical health conditions. These children are often told to ride it out in mainstream school. Let's see how they get on. Let's put a few strategies in place. Let's wait and review after the exams. Let's try part-time, but keep the mainstream placement going. On paper, it sounds reasonable. In practice, what it often means is we ask a child whose nervous system is already overwhelmed to sit in bright lights, constant noise, unpredictable social dynamics, timed tasks, changing rules, and an environment where their differences are constantly highlighted. And then we add the weight of high starkers exams on top. We say things like, everyone finds exams stressful, you just have to push through. Life is full of pressure, they need to toughen up. If we give them special arrangement, it's not fair on the others. We ignore the fact that they have often been masking for years, holding in meltdowns, copying peers, forcing eye contact, mimicking behaviour just to survive. We ignore the sensory overload, the emotional cost of social interaction, the effort it takes to decode verbal instructions, the anxiety of not knowing the plan. We say they're fine in school because they smile politely at adults. We say there are no problems because the meltdowns happen at home. And in the middle of all that, we drop the big one. By the way, your entire future depends on how you perform in these exams, in this building, in this way, on this exact day, under fluorescent lights, with all of your triggers present. Good luck. We call it inclusion. To the child, it can feel like slow motion drowning. This is how we push children towards depression, towards burnout, towards a sense of failure, not because they are not intelligent, but because we have decided that intelligence can only be measured one way. Signs a child's mental health is being sacrificed for exams. So how do we know when the balance has tipped and exams are costing too much? Here are some signs to look out for in children and teens. School anxiety or refusal, Sunday night stomach aches, headaches, Tears, panic, shutdowns, begging not to go. Physical symptoms with no clear medical cause, nausea, dizziness, chest pain, shaking, migraines, often ramping up around assessment weeks. Changing sleep or eating, struggling to fall asleep, nightmares, waking early, binge eating or loss of appetite, loss of joy, no interest in hobbies, friends or activities they used to enjoy. Everything feels like a chore. Perfectionism or self-criticism. I'm thick, I'm going to fail anyway, ripping up work, deleting revision notes if they're not perfect. Masking fatigue, holding it together all day, then collapsing or exploding at home, shouting, crying, withdrawing or zoning out. Self-harm or dark thoughts, talking about not wanting to be here, making comments like, everyone will be better off without me, or if I fail, there's no point. When we see these things, this is not the moment to say, come on, it's only a few more weeks. Once exams are over, you can relax. Everyone feels like this during exam season. This is the moment to say, exams are not worth your mental health, full stop. What do you need? How can we reduce this pressure? What can we change right now? Because a grade can be retaken, a life cannot. What it actually means to put mental health first. Let's get practical. Mental health first sounds lovely on a school poster, but what does it look like in real life? For parents and carers, it might mean giving explicit permission to step back, saying out loud, if revising is making you ill, we will cut it back. If school is making you ill, we will talk about alternatives. You are more important than any exam. Challenging school when needed. Asking, what can we reduce? Can my child miss certain lessons? Can they revise from home? Can we drop a subject? Can we use flexi schooling, online provisions or reasonable adjustments? Being willing to consider non-traditional routes. College later, functional skills instead of GCSEs, home education, access courses in adulthood. There are many paths to good life that do not involve smashing every exam at 16. For schools and teachers, mental health first might look like reducing shame around grades. No more public ranking boards, no more name and shame for mock results, no more comparing one child's progress to another in front of the class. Normalising flexibility. Some students sit in exams in smaller rooms, using rest breaks, using laptops or taking fewer subjects is not special treatment, it's equality. Rethinking attendance obsession. Instead of you must be in school at all costs, moving towards you must be safe, regulated and ready to learn. If you're not, let's work together on a plan. Listening to the child. Many young people, especially neurodivergent ones, will tell you what's not working if adults actually listened and believed them. For young people listening, putting your mental health first might mean being honest when you are not coping, asking for help more than once if you're ignored the first time, remembering that your worth is not measured in grades, sets or practical targets, knowing that it's okay to take an alternative route, to pause, to recover, to try again later, or to choose a path that suits your brain and your body. Why just ride it out in mainstream can be dangerous. Now I want to zoom in on that phrase we hear so often. They just need to ride it out in mainstream. On paper it sounds like resilience. In reality it can be a slow erosion of a child's self-esteem. Here's what riding it out often looks like for a child with special educational needs. Sitting in a classroom where the work doesn't match the way their brain learns. Being told they're fine because they're quiet while their anxiety is roaring inside. Watching other children sail through tasks that feel impossible for them. constantly being in environments that are too noisy, too bright, too unpredictable, feeling alone when they're in a whole class of people because there's no one in their tribe, being pushed for shutdowns, meltdowns, lateness or incomplete homework, behaviours that are actually signs of overload. Coming home exhausted, collapsing, and then being told they're fine at school, so it must be the parenting. When adults say, ride it out, all the child hears is, your needs aren't important. Fitting in is more important than feeling safe. We aren't going to change the system, we're going to try and change you. Over time, this message can sink in so deeply that the child internalises it as, I am wrong, I am too much, I am not enough, there's something wrong with me. This is the fertile ground in which depression grows. It's not dramatic to say this when a child spends years in an environment that constantly tells them, directly or indirectly, that they are the problem. It rewires their sense of self. And then we wonder why at 13, 14, 15, we suddenly see self-harm, eating difficulties, panic attacks, school refusal, suicidal thoughts. They are not random, they are the body and brain saying, I cannot carry this anymore. So no, I don't believe in riding it out at any cost. I've had to learn this the hard way. I believe in asking a much braver question. What environment would actually allow this child to thrive? Child-led learning, what it is and what it isn't. This brings us to child-led learning. When people hear that phrase, they sometimes picture chaos. Kids running wild, no structure, no boundaries, no qualifications. That's not what child-led learning is. Child-led learning is about starting from the child's interests, needs and pace. Building learning around their strengths, curiosity and natural motivation instead of crushing it. Respecting their nervous system, their sensory profile and their way of processing the world. Not to try and make them compliant to fit in. It doesn't mean no boundaries, it means reasonable boundaries that are flexible and humane. In a child-led model, we might ask questions like, what lights this child up? How do they learn best? Is it visually, kinesthetically, through discussion or through doing? When in the day are they most alert? When are they most fatigued? Working around their body clock? What environments help them regulate? Keep them in them environments instead of trying to push them into a busy environment. Do they regulate more outdoors, at home, in the quiet? How can we link essential skills like reading, writing and numeracy to things they actually care about? For example, a child who loves gaming might learn maths through game design, probability or coding. A child obsessed with animals might write stories, create presentations or do research based on their favourite species. A practical hands-on learner might learn science through experiments in the kitchen or garden rather than endless worksheets. An anxious child might learn better one-to-one at home or in a small group with movement breaks rather than in a class of 30 and being made to sit there with no rest break at all. Child-led doesn't mean the child is in charge of everything. Adults are still there to keep them safe, to offer opportunities, introduce new ideas, help them navigate the world. But instead of dragging the child along behind a curriculum, we walk alongside them. For many neurodivergent children, this approach is not a luxury, it's the difference between learning with joy versus learning with terror. My daughter loved learning. It has been knocked out of her. Again, I have learnt the hard way. Growing into a confident adult versus growing into an adult who believes they're broken is so important. Child-led learning and exams, can they coexist? People often ask, but what about exams? You can't be child-led and still get GCSEs, can you? You absolutely can if you flip the order. Instead of the exam is the goal, let's force the child to meet it, we start with the child's well-being is the goal. If exams fit around that, great. If they don't, we find another way. In practice, that might look like delaying exams, sitting GCSEs at 17 or 18 instead of 16. Education doesn't suddenly stop on your 16th birthday. Taking fewer subjects, prioritising what's actually useful or important to the young person, not what looks good on a school performance sheet. Using alternative qualifications, functional skills, college-based courses, portfolio-based assessments, vocational routes, creative or technical paths. Studying at home or in small settings, home education, online classes, tutoring, specialist provisions, flexi schooling. If my daughter was given the chance to learn online like she wanted to, we wouldn't be in the position that we are in now. But we just did what we was told. But the reason I'm doing this podcast is don't do as you're told. Listen to your child before they end up completely broken. They can choose not to sit some exams at all. For some young people, protecting their mental health means acknowledging that formal exams are not worth the cost and carve a different path. When learning is a child-led exam because one possible tool, not the definition of success. And here's the interesting thing. When a child feels safe, respected and in control of their learning, they are often more capable of tackling an exam later on if they choose to, because they have not spent years associated learning with panic and failure. A different definition of success. Let's fast forward 10 or 20 years. What do we actually want for these children? Excuse me. Do we want adults with glowing exam records but chronic anxiety, no sense of self and burnt out nervous systems? Or do we want adults who know how they learn best, who respect their own limits, who can say no when something is harming their mental health instead of people pleasing? Ones who have discovered their strengths, adults who feel safe being who they are. Most of us, if we're honest, will choose the second list. Yet our day-to-day choices in education often send the opposite message. We protect the system before we protect the child. We protect the timetable before we protect their nervous system. We protect exam statistics before we protect their joy. Child-led learning and mental health first approach ask us to flip that completely. It asks us to say, we will not sacrifice children on the altar of exam results. We will design education around human beings, not human beings around data. We will measure success in well-being, curiosity, creativity, relationships and the ability to live a life that feels meaningful, not just in how many grade 9s we can produce. As we come to the end of this episode, I want to leave you with a few questions. If you're a parent or carer, is my child's mental health currently being sacrificed for the sake of school or exams? If so, what is one thing I can change this week to reduce that, even a little? Who can I talk to? School, GP, SENCO, support groups, other parents, to explore alternative options. If you're a teacher or school leader, think, where in our setting do we prioritise performance over well-being? What small shifts could we make in language, in policies, in expectations to genuinely put mental health first? How can we centre the voices of neurodivergent and SEND students when we make decisions? And if you're a young person listening, what do you need right now to feel safer, calmer, and more supported? Who in your life feels like a safe adult to talk to? Can you remind yourself daily that you are more than your grades, your attendance record, or your ability to sit exams? And for all of us, what might the world look like if we truly believe that no exam, no school, no system is worth a child losing their mental health? I think it would look like more flexible education, more child-led learning, more creativity, more space for difference, and the generation of young people who grow up knowing their value was never ever conditional on how they performed in an exam hall. Thank you for listening to this episode. If this hit a nerve for you, you are not alone. There are many families, many teachers, many young people quietly questioning the way things are done. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear that they are not failing. The system is failing them. Look after yourselves, look after your kids, and remember, mental health comes first. Exams can wait.